Imagine a world where the boundaries between the known and the unknown fade away, where time and space are nothing more than illusions that dissolve into the vast ocean of the soul. A world beyond death, where the very essence of our being transcends the limitations of the physical body. This is the journey that the Voyage of the Soul invites you on, a work that not only challenges our understanding of life, but also unveils the deepest mysteries of what happens after life. Written by the visionary Helena Blavatsky, one of the most brilliant and enigmatic minds of the 19th century, this text transports us to an ethereal realm where the laws of the universe are revealed with such stunning clarity that they will forever change your perception of existence. Through her captivating prose, Blavatsky invites us to embark on a mystical journey, a journey into the hidden dimensions of being, where death is not the end but the beginning of a new form of existence. The Voyage of the Soul is not merely a story about life after death. It is a profound and transformative journey that takes us from the darkness of ignorance to the light of spiritual understanding, challenging our most deeply rooted beliefs about life, destiny, and purpose. Here, souls travel through unexplored realms, seeking enlightenment, facing trials of consciousness, and exploring the eternal cycles of reincarnation. Join me on this unparalleled journey. Dare to discover what most fear to know. Prepare to expand your consciousness beyond the imaginable and delve into a mystery that has captivated the human mind since the beginning of time. What happens after life? The answer is waiting to be discovered, and this book is the key that opens that secret door to the infinite. So close your eyes, take a deep breath, and let the Voyage of the Soul guide you through a horizon you never thought you could reach. Since the dawn of time, humanity has feared death. It has tried to understand it, explain it, even deny it. But in its deepest essence, the human being has been trapped in a great illusion. The belief that death is the end, the annihilation of the self, the point of no return on the path of existence. This is the greatest of fallacies, the shadow that obscures the truth, the veil that separates man from the understanding of his own immortality. The mystery schools have taught since time immemorial that death is not the end, but a transition, a threshold that the soul crosses to continue its journey in other planes of existence. There is no end for consciousness, no extinction for the essence of being. The body perishes, yes, like a garment discarded when it has fulfilled its purpose, but the spirit is eternal, immutable, a spark of divinity that can never be destroyed. However, the human mind, trapped in the illusion of time and matter, clings to the idea that reality is only what the senses can perceive. It believes that life is limited to the short interval between birth and death, that the unknown is a void, that what cannot be seen or touched does not exist. But those who have managed to pierce the veil, those who have experienced the expansion of consciousness beyond the physical body, know that existence extends far beyond what the eyes can behold. From the Vedic texts of India to the papyri of Egypt, from Hermetic teachings to the accounts of medieval mystics, all spiritual traditions have spoken of the continuity of the soul, of the invisible planes that unfold beyond earthly existence, of the great journey that every being undertakes after leaving its physical shell. Yet in the modern era, this knowledge has been relegated to superstition, buried under the arrogance of a science that refuses to accept what it cannot measure, what it cannot dissect, what escapes the limits of its materialist understanding. However, the truth persists, not only in the ancient sealed texts, but in the testimonies of those who have been at the edge of death and returned. Near-death experiences, documented all over the world, have revealed a common pattern: the sensation of detaching from the body, the perception of a light of indescribable love, the review of one's life in an eternal instant, the presence of beings that guide the passage to another reality. These experiences cannot be dismissed as mere hallucinations, for those who have lived them return with transformative knowledge, with the absolute certainty that death is not the end, but an awakening to a vaster reality. The initiates in the mysteries understood that death is just a door, a change in vibration, a transition from the dense state of matter to more subtle planes of existence. The soul, freed from the weight of the body, continues its journey according to the frequency it has developed in life. Not all souls experience the same transition, for what we encounter on the other side is nothing more than a reflection of what we have cultivated within. The ancient Egyptians prepared their priests to die, to cross without fear, with full awareness that life after life is as real as earthly existence. The Tibetans, through the Bardo Thodol, the so-called Book of the Dead, instruct the deceased in their journey through the different planes of the beyond, guiding them in the process of detachment and ascension. In the Hermetic tradition, it was taught that death is an opportunity to free the consciousness from the prison of matter and rise toward pure knowledge. But why has this truth been hidden? Why have religions imposed the idea of final judgment, eternal punishment, condemnation for those who do not submit to their dogmas? Because fear of death is the most powerful tool of control. A man who believes in final extinction or eternal damnation is a submissive, fearful man, willing to obey to avoid punishment. But one who understands their immortality, who knows that their existence transcends life and death, frees themselves from all chains, becoming a sovereign being, impossible to subdue. Death is not an enemy. It is not a lurking shadow. It is not a punishment. It is not the end. It is a natural transition, a cosmic law that governs the flow of existence. The soul enters the material world, lives, learns, experiences, and when it has fulfilled its purpose, returns to its original state, only to continue its journey in new scenarios, in new forms, on new levels of consciousness. This book is not speculation nor a treatise based on empty beliefs. It is a revelation of what esoteric traditions have taught for millennia, combined with the experiences of those who have glimpsed the other side and returned with answers. Here we will explore what really happens at the moment of death, how the soul travels through the invisible planes, what role karma plays in shaping the destiny of the spirit, and how we can prepare for the great transition with wisdom, without fear, with the certainty that existence does not end with the last breath. Because the truth has always been before us, waiting to be recognized. Death is not the end. It is only a new beginning. And whoever understands this, whoever dares to look beyond the veil, will discover that immortality is not a hidden mystery but the very essence of being. The Journey of the Soul, Reincarnation, Karma, and Life After Death by Helena Blavatsky. We have noticed that more than 90% of those who visit our channel are not subscribed. You can support this project by pressing the subscribe button and giving the video a like. Thank you for inspiring us to continue creating more and better content for you. Are you ready to transform your life? Chapter 1: Death According to Occult Wisdom. Humanity has turned death into its greatest enigma, its deepest fear, and its most unshakable dogma. From ancient civilizations to modern times, the human being has sought answers about what happens after the last breath. But the truth has been distorted by beliefs imposed by religions that have turned death into an instrument of control, by materialist science that refuses to accept the existence of consciousness beyond the body. However, death is not a mystery for those who have studied the arcana of the universe, for those who have explored the invisible planes, for the initiates in the mystery schools who, since ancient times, have transmitted the hidden truth about the nature of the soul and its eternal journey. In esoteric thought, death is not annihilation, but a transition from one state of vibration to another. Everything that exists is energy in different degrees of manifestation, from the density of matter to the subtlety of spirit. Physical life is only an episode within the vastness of the soul's existence, a cycle within the ceaseless flow of reincarnations, learning, and evolution. Death, far from being the end, is the return to a state of expanded consciousness, a liberation from the prison of the body that allows the being to perceive dimensions that were previously veiled to the senses. The spiritual traditions of both East and West have spoken of this process under different names, but all agree on its essence. The soul, after leaving the body, experiences an expansion of perception, finds itself in a state of greater clarity, and begins its passage to other planes of existence. The Egyptians represented this journey in the Book of the Dead, where the deceased had to face various trials to achieve immortality. In Buddhism, the Bardo is spoken of, the intermediate state between one life and another, where the soul is confronted with the truth of its existence and prepared for its next reincarnation. In Kabbalah, it is taught that consciousness passes through different spiritual worlds until it reintegrates with the divine source. However, the way the soul experiences death is not the same for everyone. There is no single destination nor a fixed path, as the transition depends on the level of awareness achieved in life. Those who have cultivated wisdom, who have understood the illusory nature of the material world, who have awakened their spiritual perception, cross death with serenity, fully aware that they are only leaving behind a temporary shell. But those who have lived attached to matter, who have feared death as an absolute end, who have denied the existence of the soul, encounter confusion and uncertainty in their transition, a state of shadow from which they may take a long time to free themselves. The initiates of the mysteries have learned to die while still alive. They have understood that death is nothing more than a change in frequency, that the true essence of being is not in the body, but in consciousness, and that by transcending the fear of death one conquers true freedom. In ancient esoteric schools, preparation for death was a fundamental part of the initiatory path, not as a morbid act of contemplating the end, but as a practice of detachment, a deep understanding that physical life is only a transitory manifestation within the great cycle of the soul. But what exactly happens at the moment of death? Occult traditions and the testimonies of those who have had near-death experiences reveal that the first instant after separation from the body is a moment of absolute clarity. The soul sees itself detaching from the flesh, observes its surroundings with a lucidity never experienced in life, and feels an indescribable lightness, as if it had suddenly cast off a tremendous weight. Then, depending on its degree of evolution, it experiences different levels of reality. Some are received by beings of light, deceased relatives, or spiritual guides who help them in the transition. Others pass through a tunnel that leads them to a dimension where the mind faces its own creation, a realm where emotions and thoughts generate the environment in which the soul will dwell for a time. But not all souls find the path immediately. Those who have lived with extreme attachment to the material world, with fear, hatred, or resentment, may become trapped in intermediate planes, in what some traditions call Kamaloka, the world of desires. These wandering souls do not understand that they have died, feel that something holds them back, and cling to earthly life. In many cases, they try to contact the living, generating what is known as ghostly phenomena or lower astral entities. The mystery schools have always warned of this danger. That is why, in many ancient traditions, death was accompanied by rites of passage, prayers and guides for the soul, with the purpose of helping the spirit cross the planes without becoming trapped in the shadows of attachment. In Tibet, monks would recite the Bardo Thodol for weeks, guiding the deceased soul toward the light. In Egypt, priests placed sacred inscriptions in tombs to remind the deceased of their path. But in the modern world, this preparation has been forgotten. Death has been reduced to a biological event, to the extinction of bodily functions, to an empty act without meaning. It has become a taboo, something avoided in discussion, a shadow hidden beneath empty rituals and purposeless mourning. And for that reason, many souls depart in a state of bewilderment, without guidance, without direction, without the necessary preparation to cross the threshold with full awareness. This chapter is only the beginning of knowledge that has been hidden from humanity for too long. Throughout these pages, we will delve into wisdom without fear, with the certainty that life after life is as real as existence on earth. Because death is not the end, it is the awakening. Chapter 2. The separation of the soul and the expansion of consciousness. The moment of death is a sacred transition, an instant in which consciousness is freed from its material prison and opens to dimensions that previously remained hidden. But this separation does not occur uniformly for all beings. The way in which the soul detaches from the body depends on multiple factors: its degree of spiritual evolution, its state of mind at the moment of departure, its level of attachment to matter, and the manner in which it has lived its earthly existence. For most, death is a gradual process. It is not an immediate blackout, but a progressive slipping in which perception expands and consciousness begins to experience reality from a completely new perspective. Those who have lived closed off to the physical world may feel resistance, confusion, or even denial. In contrast, those who have understood that death is only a transition often experience a sense of liberation, as if shedding a heavy cloak that limited their true being. Mystics have described this detachment as the moment when the soul, upon leaving the body, suddenly feels light, free from the bonds of pain, illness, and earthly worries. In the first moments, most of the deceased observe their own body from the outside, as if they were witnesses to a scene in which they no longer participate. They can see their family members crying, feel their emotions, but without the weight of human anguish. They find themselves in a state of pure observation, where time ceases to be linear and consciousness expands beyond the limits imposed by the physical mind. The process of separation and the different bodies of being. To fully understand what happens at this moment, it is necessary to remember that the human being is not composed solely of flesh and bone. Occult wisdom teaches that the physical body is only the densest manifestation of a much more complex structure, which includes the astral body, the mental body, and the spiritual body. Each of these bodies vibrates at a different frequency and has its own function within the soul's multidimensional existence. When death occurs, the physical body ceases to operate, but the astral body remains active. It is within this body that the soul experiences its first perceptions after separation. Here, the person's identity is maintained. Their thoughts and emotions still persist, and in many cases the soul does not immediately realize that it has left its physical form. This is the reason why some spirits remain in the earthly world, wandering in a state of confusion, unaware that they no longer belong to this dimension. The initiates of the mystery schools have learned to recognize this state and to transcend it quickly. They know that death is nothing more than the shedding of a temporary vehicle, and that the true self is not found in the body but in eternal consciousness. This is why the great masters have taught techniques for dying consciously, that is, leaving the body with full lucidity, without fear or resistance, passing through the intermediate planes without becoming trapped in illusions. The expansion of consciousness and the vision of the beyond. As the soul distances itself from the physical world, consciousness begins to expand. This is one of the most transcendental moments of the transition, for it is here where the human being comprehends in an instant everything that was previously veiled. The mind is freed from the limitations of rational thought and accesses a broader vision of existence. Many souls at this point experience a profound sense of unity with the universe. They realize that their individual identity has never been separate from the whole, that they have always been part of an infinite web of existence. Those who have been spiritually prepared may experience a state of indescribable bliss, a recognition of their true nature as beings of light, as fragments of divine consciousness. But for others, this moment can be overwhelming. Those who have lived in absolute materialism, denying the existence of the soul, may feel disoriented when finding themselves in a reality they did not expect. They may try to cling to their former identity, resisting the acceptance that their existence has shifted to another plane. These are what many traditions have called wandering souls, spirits who remain at the threshold between life and death, unable to move forward because their minds have not yet accepted the truth of their state. Esoteric texts teach that, at this moment, the intervention of spiritual guides is crucial. These entities, called by many names, angels, masters, guardians of the threshold, present themselves to assist the soul in its transition. However, their assistance can only be received if the deceased is willing to listen, to release attachments, and to allow their consciousness to continue expanding without resistance. The life review and confrontation with karma. One of the most common phenomena in near-death experiences is the life review. Many accounts coincide in describing that after the separation from the body, the soul relives every moment of its existence with a clarity impossible to achieve in life. It not only sees its actions, but experiences them from the perspective of those it affected. If it caused pain to others, it will feel that pain as if it were its own. If it offered love and compassion, it will experience the joy it brought to others. This review is not a judgment imposed by an external entity. There is no punishing God sitting on a throne deciding the soul's fate. It is the being itself who confronts the truth of its actions, who understands the impact of every thought, word, and deed it emanated during its incarnation. This process is what esoteric tradition has called the karmic mirror, where the soul observes itself without filters, without justifications, in the pure light of truth. For some, this experience is liberating, as they understand their mistakes and accept the opportunity to correct them in future incarnations. For others, it can be painful, as they clearly see the missed opportunities, the harm caused, the lessons not learned. But even in the most difficult cases, this process is part of the soul's awakening, a necessary step for its evolution. The next threshold, The soul's choice. After the life review, the soul finds itself in a state of transition. Depending on its level of evolution, its vibration, and its learnings, it will take one of several paths. Some souls ascend quickly to higher planes where they continue their development in realities of greater harmony and knowledge. Others, burdened with the weight of their attachments, may choose to reincarnate to continue learning. And some, trapped in denial or fear, may remain suspended in the intermediate planes, repeating patterns until they manage to awaken. The mystery schools have taught that the key to a harmonious transition is preparation in life. The one who understands the process of death and accepts it without fear can direct their consciousness with will, clearly choosing their next destination. It is neither chance nor a capricious deity that decides the soul's future. It is the soul itself, based on what it has built in each of its experiences. Thus, death is nothing more than a change of scenery, a new page in the eternal book of the soul. And the one who has awakened to this truth no longer fears the end, because they know that the end does not exist, only the eternal return of the spirit to its source. Chapter 3: The Spiritual Planes and the Path Beyond. Death is not an endpoint, but a transition between realities. Matter is only the densest manifestation of an infinite vibration, and when the body dies, consciousness does not disappear. It slides through different planes of existence, from the most ancient traditions to the most recent research on near-death experiences. The testimony is always the same. The soul leaves the body but does not dissolve into nothingness. On the contrary, it finds itself in a vast ocean of existence that extends far beyond what it could ever conceive, while trapped in the illusion of flesh. The occult teachings have described these planes as levels of vibration that reflect the inner state of each being. There is no heaven or hell in the dogmatic sense that religions have used to terrify humanity, but rather states of consciousness that the soul experiences according to the frequency it has developed in life. At the moment of death, the spirit's vibration is what dictates the path it will follow. It is neither punishment nor reward, but the natural result of the universal law of affinity. Each being is drawn to the dimension that corresponds to its degree of evolution. Those who have lived in harmony with the laws of the cosmos, who have cultivated wisdom and love, ascend to spheres of light where consciousness expands and merges with realities of sublime beauty and understanding. In these planes, the soul experiences a bliss impossible to describe in human terms, for it finds itself freed from the limits of physical perception and surrounded by vibrations of purity, clarity, and unconditional love. There is no anguish, no separation, no fear, no suffering, only the recognition that life is eternal and that death is merely a passage. However, not all souls find this path easily. Those who have lived bound to matter, obsessed with possession, power, and desire, become trapped in intermediate planes where their own minds project a reflection of their attachments. These dimensions, described in the esoteric tradition as the Kamaloka, are states where the spirit continues to feel the impulses of physical life but no longer has a body to satisfy them. In these planes, unfulfilled desires become torment. Passions are unleashed in a void that can never be filled. Here descend those who do not accept their death, those who try to cling to earthly existence through subtle influences over the living, those who, unable to detach from who they were, become wandering shadows on the thresholds between worlds. And even lower, in regions where vibration densifies to the brink of gloom, are found those who have cultivated darkness, those who have built their reality on the suffering of others, those who have fed hatred and destruction. These beings are not punished by an external will, but are dragged by their own energy to worlds of shadow, where the only possible light is the one they themselves choose to ignite within. But even in these planes, where souls suffer the weight of their own negativity, there exists the possibility of redemption, because the universe never locks any being into eternal damnation. Every vibration can be raised. All darkness can be transmuted into light. Every consciousness can awaken if it opens itself to the truth. The mystery schools have taught that the soul is not alone on this journey. Throughout history, initiates have described the presence of guides, beings of light, who assist the newly departed in their transition. These guides may be spiritual masters, ancestors who have reached a sufficient degree of evolution to help others, or even higher fragments of the deceased's own consciousness that manifest to guide them in their awakening. However, the soul can only perceive them if it is prepared to receive their help. Those who die in a state of confusion, clinging entangled in fear, may be unable to see the light that is offered to them and thus remain trapped in the shadows of their own perception. The journey of the soul through the spiritual planes does not follow a uniform path for everyone. Some ascend quickly, others remain for long periods in the intermediate planes, learning and purifying before continuing their evolution. It all depends on the state in which death found them, but inevitably at some point, each soul arrives at the moment where it must decide its next destination. For some, this means merging with the light, ascending to levels where individuality dissolves and consciousness integrates with the totality of the cosmos. For others, it means preparing for a new incarnation, to return to matter and continue learning in a new body, a new life, with new tests and new opportunities. At this point in the journey, the soul accesses what the esoteric tradition knows as the Akashic records, the universal memory where all its experiences, every thought, and all its past lives are recorded. There it can clearly see the purpose of its existence, understand why it chose the life it has just left behind, and recognize the karmic ties it still needs to resolve. This is the moment when the soul makes the conscious decision to return or to continue its evolution in other planes. The more advanced souls may choose not to reincarnate, but instead to become guides for other souls, assisting in humanity's evolutionary process from higher planes. These are the so-called masters of wisdom, those who have transcended the wheel of births and deaths, but who, out of compassion and will, choose to remain connected with humanity, helping to illuminate the path for those still trapped in the cycle of reincarnation. But for the majority, the journey does not end at this point. Most souls feel the need to return, to complete unfinished lessons, to continue their evolution in the density of matter. And thus, the cycle renews. The soul descends once more, forgetting what it has learned, being born in a new body, in a new time, in a new setting where it will face the challenges it has chosen for itself. The path beyond is not a final judgment, nor an immovable fate. It is a constant flow, a dance of energy and consciousness that moves between dimensions, between lives, between experiences. Death is nothing more than a door, and what lies beyond is not a mystery but a reflection of what each soul has built within. And so the one who understands this process ceases to fear death because they know there is no end, no separation, no punishment, nor arbitrariness, that the universe is a structure of order and harmony, where each being is exactly where their vibration leads them, where each soul finds what it needs for its evolution. The path beyond is the path of the soul. There is no loss, no end, only transition, learning, expansion, because ultimately, death is nothing but the great revelation of what life has always been in its purest form, without the veil of material illusion, without the prison of time, without the limits of the flesh. Chapter 4. The Judgment of the Soul and the Karmic Mirror. The moment of death is not the end of existence, but the beginning of a transcendental phase in the evolution of the soul. Beyond the illusion of matter, consciousness faces its own essence, and in this encounter one of the most inescapable truths is revealed. No one escapes themselves. There are no celestial judges issuing arbitrary sentences, nor divine tribunals punishing or rewarding according to dogmas imposed by religions that have distorted the reality of the beyond. The true judgment of the soul is not external but internal, a reflection of what the being has built throughout its multiple incarnations. Esoteric wisdom has taught since time immemorial that upon leaving the physical body, the soul undergoes a complete review of its existence. This experience, described by the oldest traditions and confirmed in the accounts of those who have died and returned, is not an allegory or a myth, but a natural mechanism of the post-mortem process. In this state, the being relives every instant of its life with absolute clarity, without the distortion of the ego, without excuses or justifications, seeing not only its own actions, but feeling the impact they have had on others. The karmic mirror is the stage where truth is revealed without filters. Every thought, word, and action is projected before the soul as a perfect and unalterable sequence. Every act of love and generosity, every betrayal and every deceit, every impulse of compassion or selfishness is fully experienced, not from the perspective of the one who acted, but from the perception of those who received it. Here lies the true judgment. The soul not only remembers what it did, but feels in its own essence the good or the harm it has caused. The sages of antiquity taught that the universe is a perfect reflection of each being's vibration. There is no punishing force or divinity imposing rewards or penalties, but rather an immutable law of balance where every energy sent forth returns to its source. This is what is known in Vedic traditions as karma, a word that has been misunderstood and oversimplified in modern culture. Karma is neither punishment nor a moral debt. It is the manifestation of the energy generated by the being. It is the natural consequence of actions and the fundamental structure of cosmic learning. When the soul faces its karmic mirror, it cannot deceive itself. There are no words to justify, no masks to hide behind. In this state, the ego holds no power, and the truth shines with an intensity that would have been unbearable in life. Here, the real impact of each action is understood, and this revelation is less a punishment and more a purification. There is no greater suffering for the spirit than to see, with absolute clarity, the wasted opportunities, the moments where it could have chosen compassion but instead opted for selfishness, the times when it could have risen and chose to remain in the shadows. But there is also no greater joy than recognizing the light it has sown, the love it has given, the harmony it has created in the lives of other beings. Mystery schools have taught their disciples for centuries about the importance of this post-mortem review. Those who live with higher awareness do not fear the moment of judgment, because they know that everything they have sown will be reflected back to them, and they have consciously chosen to sow light. However, for those who have ignored this knowledge, the experience can be overwhelming. Many spirits, when confronted with their own reflection, feel the weight of their karma so intensely that they cling to guilt and despair, becoming trapped in states of self-imposed suffering. These are the ones described in traditions as wandering souls, caught in a cycle of remorse, unable to move forward to the next stage of their evolution. Yet the law of karma is not an eternal condemnation. Just as every action generates a consequence, every being has the power to transmute its energy, to correct its mistakes, to balance its actions through new opportunities for growth. Reincarnation is the mechanism through which the soul redeems and evolves, the path by which it returns to material existence to settle its debts and raise its vibration. Here lies the key to existence. The universe is not punitive, but educational. Death is neither a punishment nor an arbitrary liberation. It is a transition in which the being receives exactly what it has created. If it has lived with awareness, love, and wisdom, its passage will be luminous, its expansion harmonious, and its next destination will be in realms of higher vibration. If it has lived unconsciously, in selfishness or destruction, its own karma will guide it to experiences that will force it to face what it has generated, not as punishment, but as an opportunity to restore balance. Yet even in the darkest cases, the light never fully goes out. The soul, in its purest essence, knows that existence is an eternal cycle of learning, and while some may need multiple lifetimes to reach understanding, awakening is inevitable. No one is condemned forever. No being is destined for perdition. Everything can be redeemed when consciousness awakens and chooses to align with the truth of the universe. For this reason, initiates of the mysteries have worked for centuries on preparing for death. They have understood that there is no greater peace than departing without pending debts, with the certainty of having lived in harmony with cosmic laws. They have known that the only way to transcend the judgment of the karmic mirror is to act in life with the awareness that everything will be reflected back, that every thought has an echo, that every action leaves a mark that will eventually be faced. In death, the veil of illusion fades, and the reality of the soul is fully exposed. There are no secrets, no deceptions, no shadows to hide in. Only the pure truth remains, reflected in the infinite light of the universe. And so the final question every soul must ask before crossing the threshold is this: what will my mirror reflect when there are no more shadows left to deceive myself? Chapter 5. The beings who assist the passage, guides and guardians. Death is not a solitary journey. Since ancient times, hidden wisdom has revealed that the soul, in its passage beyond the threshold, is accompanied by beings whose role is to assist in the transition, to guide and to watch over those who leave behind material existence. These guides and guardians are not mythological figures or projections of the human desire to avoid loneliness at the moment of departure. but real intelligences operating in the subtle planes, entities whose existence has been documented both in the records of mystery schools and in countless modern accounts of near-death experiences. From the moment the soul begins to detach from the body, its perception expands. In many cases, its first encounter is with these beings. For some, they appear as figures of light, radiating an incomparable presence of love and wisdom. For others, they take on familiar forms, sometimes manifesting as loved ones who passed before, with the purpose of providing comfort and gently guiding the transition. But beyond the forms they adopt, their essence is always the same. They are guardians of the transition, entities operating between worlds to ensure that the soul does not become trapped in intermediate states of confusion or attachment. In esoteric tradition, various hierarchies of these guides have been mentioned. In some doctrines, they are called angels of death, not in the terrifying sense imposed by religions, but as heralds of awakening, tasked with escorting the soul to the next phase of its existence. In Hermeticism, they are described as higher intelligences linked to cosmic order, whose mission is to maintain balance in the processes of birth and death. In Theosophy, they are known as masters of transition, advanced entities who have transcended the cycle of reincarnations and have chosen to serve as guides for those still walking the path of learning. But not all who assist in death are beings of light. There also exist guardians of the threshold, entities who guard the passages between worlds, whose role is not to receive with gentleness, but to test the true essence of the soul crossing over. In ancient texts, these guardians have been depicted as imposing, sometimes fearsome figures, not because they seek to inspire terror, but because they reflect the vibration of the soul confronting them. For those who have lived in harmony with the laws of the cosmos, these guardians pose no obstacle. But for those who have cultivated darkness, they become a mirror of their own energy, a barrier preventing ascent to higher planes until the soul has purified its karmic burden. Mystery schools taught that at the moment of death, what is encountered is not a judgment imposed by an external deity, but the manifestation of each being's inner truth. Thus, the guides and guardians who appear are not external to the soul but projections of its own vibrational state. Those who have cultivated light will perceive the presence of elevated beings, will feel the call of higher dimensions, and will be gently guided through the transition. But those who have lived in fear, selfishness, or spiritual ignorance may encounter a more turbulent passage, for their own mind will project the shadows they themselves have created. However, even in these cases, the guides never abandon the soul. They are always there, waiting for it to release its fear, to accept the truth of its state, and to open up to the help being offered. In many esoteric traditions, there is talk of the inner voice that guides the deceased in moments of greatest confusion. This voice is not a hallucination or a creation of the subconscious, but the manifestation of the higher self, the immortal part of the being that has always been present, but which in life was overshadowed by the noise of the mind and the distractions of the material world. For those who have reached a certain degree of evolution in life, death is a serene awakening. They immediately recognize themselves as free souls, feel the presence of their guides, and follow the path with confidence. But for those who have lived closed off to the material world, the process may be slower. Some souls become trapped in the intermediate planes, failing to recognize their state, drifting in a world of shadows created by their own perception. These are what many cultures call wandering spirits, souls that have not fully crossed to the other side because they are still bound to the illusion of earthly life. The guides work to help these souls find their way. They manifest in their dreams, in their visions, in subtle signs that seek to awaken their awareness. But the universal law is clear. No being can be forced to move forward. Free will is absolute, and each soul must choose the moment when it is ready to continue its journey. In the ancient mystery schools, initiates were prepared to recognize these guides before their death. They were taught to connect with them in states of deep meditation, to tune into their vibrations so that, when the moment of transition arrived, their presence would not feel unfamiliar. This knowledge has been lost in the modern world, and for this reason, so many souls pass through death in confusion and fear, unaware that helping hands await them on the other side. But this knowledge can be recovered. Those who strive in life to elevate their consciousness, to live with wisdom, and to attune to the vibration of light, will discover that death is not an unknown abyss, but a return home, and when the moment comes, they will recognize the presence of their guides as something natural, as a long-awaited reunion, as the certainty that they were never alone. Thus, the transition will not be a leap into darkness, but an awakening into the infinite clarity of existence. Because in death, as in life, everything is governed by the same truth. The vibration of the being determines the reality it will encounter beyond the threshold. Chapter 6. The Wheel of Rebirth. Why do we reincarnate? The cycle of existence does not end with death, nor does it begin with birth. Each soul is an eternal traveler, a fragment of universal consciousness that descends into the material world again and again, driven by the unbreakable law of rebirth. It is not a punishment or a meaningless cycle, but a cosmic structure, a mechanism of evolution where each life is a school, each experience a lesson, and each existence a further step on the path to perfection. Since time immemorial, hidden teachings have revealed that the soul is not a static or fixed entity, but a being in constant transformation. Each incarnation is an opportunity, a new page in the eternal book of consciousness, where the mistakes of the past can be corrected, where karmic ties can be balanced, and where the divine spark within each being can expand further toward enlightenment. But the great question humanity has asked since the beginning is this: why must we return? Why can't we remain in the eternal light after death? What force drives us, time and again, to take on a body, to live, to suffer, to love, to lose, and to search once more? Religions have offered incomplete answers. Some speak of a single life followed by a final judgment. Others promise eternal salvation for some and condemnation for others. But the truth is much deeper and fairer than any dogma fabricated to subdue the human will. Rebirth is a universal law, as immutable as gravity, as precise as the orbit of the stars in the firmament. Each being returns because there is still work to be done, because there are still lessons to be learned, because the vibration of the soul draws it to new scenarios where its karmic debts can be resolved and its essence can be refined. Reincarnation is not a theory, but a certainty for those who have gained vision beyond material illusion. In the Akashic records, the great memory of the cosmos, where all actions, thoughts, and emotions of every being are recorded, lies the complete history of each soul, its beginnings, its paths, its inner battles, and its spiritual triumphs. These records, accessible only to those who have developed the highest perception, are indisputable testimony that each life is a link in an infinite chain, where the destiny of each being is guided not by chance but by the immutable law of karma. Every return is chosen, even if the veil of forgetfulness covers the soul's memory upon reincarnating. Even if the ego insists on believing that everything begins at the cradle and ends at the grave, the reality is that each incarnation was decided before birth. The karmic law places the soul in the exact scenario it needs for its evolution, in the family where it will settle old accounts, in the circumstances that will give it the opportunity to surpass its own limits. Nothing is arbitrary, nothing is unjust. What we call destiny is merely the echo of our past actions manifesting in the present. But here arises another crucial question. If life is suffering, if the world is a stage of pain and struggle, then why does the soul return? Should it not aspire to liberate itself and never come back? This is the difference between common reincarnation and conscious reincarnation. Most human beings return driven by unresolved karma, drawn back by unfulfilled desires, by attachments they have not transcended, by the invisible ties that keep them trapped in the cycle of samsara, the endless wheel of rebirth described in Eastern teachings. But there are those who, having understood the true purpose of existence, return not out of karmic obligation, but by their own will, by the mission of helping others, by the determination to be guides for humanity. The great masters, the initiates in the mysteries, have reached the point where they are no longer bound to the wheel of reincarnation. They could merge with the immensity of the all, abandon the cycle of matter forever. But they choose to return because they know that the evolution of one being is not enough, that enlightenment is not an individual achievement, but a collective one, and that true transcendence is only attained when one leads others toward the same light. In the ancient wisdom of Tibet, the bodhisattvas are those who have attained enlightenment but postpone their final liberation to remain in the world, helping the souls still trapped in illusion. In Theosophy, these are the masters of wisdom, the guardians of hidden knowledge who have walked the path of conscious reincarnation and returned not out of need, but out of love for humanity. But the vast majority of human beings have not yet reached that state. For them, reincarnation remains an unconscious process, an inevitable return dictated by their own desires, fears, and past mistakes. And this is where knowledge becomes crucial, for one who understands the law of rebirth can begin to work toward liberation. One who recognizes the cycle can transcend it. One who takes control of their consciousness in life can also do so in death. Thus, the goal is not to escape reincarnation, but to awaken within it, to live with the awareness that each experience is a step in the expansion of the soul, to understand that each trial is a mirror of one's own karma, and that true power lies in the ability to transform that karma into wisdom. Rebirth is not a punishment, but an opportunity. It is not a condemnation, but a path. Life is not a prison, but a temple of learning. And when the soul has understood this, it no longer fears death and no longer clings to life because it knows it is eternal, because it has recognized that existence is a continuous flow, where each birth is merely a new dawn in the infinite journey of the spirit. But the question each being must ask is this: if I were to die today, would I return to repeat the same lessons, or would I awaken with enough wisdom to choose a higher destiny? Chapter 7. The Akashic Records and the Memory of Past Lives. Nothing in the universe is ever lost. Every thought, every emotion, every action leaves an indelible mark on the cosmic fabric of existence. Nothing disappears into nothingness, for energy cannot be destroyed, only transformed. What humans call the past is merely a vibration still present in the great current of time, and what is considered forgotten simply lies in a latent state, waiting for the moment when consciousness is ready to awaken it. In mysticism and esoteric philosophy, this universal memory is known as the Akashic Records, a vast reservoir of knowledge where all the experiences of the soul across its countless incarnations are stored. It is not a physical library or a closed book hidden in some corner of the cosmos, but rather a vibratory field, a frequency where everything that has been and will be is inscribed in the very fabric of existence. The word Akasha comes from Sanskrit and means ether or space. In Vedic tradition, this element is taught to be the primordial substance of the universe, the medium in which all the vibrations of creation are imprinted. Akasha is the essence that sustains reality, and within it, all emanations of consciousness are recorded, from the faintest whisper of a thought to the most transcendental events of humanity. When a soul crosses the threshold of death, it comes face to face with this cosmic memory. In the post-mortem transition, every being reviews their story with absolute clarity, without the filters of the ego or the distortions of rational thought. Their entire life parades before their eyes, not as a fragmented narrative, but as a simultaneous reality, where every action reveals its consequences, every decision is seen in its entirety, and every emotion is experienced from all possible perspectives. This is the great karmic review, the moment when the soul understands not only what it has done, but also how its existence has affected others and how it has been shaped by its previous lives. However, access to the Akashic Records is not limited to death. Under certain conditions, it is possible for an incarnated individual to come into contact with this universal memory and glimpse fragments of their past lives. This occurs in various ways, through vivid dreams that do not belong to this incarnation, through visions during deep meditative states, or even in flashes of recognition that arise when encountering places, people, or situations that evoke an inexplicable familiarity. Many have experienced the phenomenon of déjà vu, the sensation of having lived a particular moment before, of knowing a place never visited, of feeling a profound connection with someone just met. These experiences are not mere anomalies of the mind, but openings in the veil of forgetfulness, moments in which consciousness, for an instant, touches the threshold of Akashic memory and perceives the continuity of its existence through time. Mystery schools have taught specific techniques for consciously accessing the Akashic Records. The ancient Egyptian priests, the rishis of India, and the Hermetic initiates knew that the knowledge of the past is key to the evolution of the soul. Those who mastered the methods of deep introspection could travel through time, not as mere observers, but as active participants in the reconstruction of their destiny. The one who remembers chooses with greater wisdom. The one who knows their story stops repeating the same mistakes. But access to the Akashic records is not a privilege or a gift reserved for a select few. It is an innate right of the soul, though its recovery depends on the vibrational state of the individual. The remembrance of past lives is not a whim, but an act of responsibility. Not everyone is ready to face the truth of their own being, for remembering implies accepting the totality of what one has been, both the luminous and the dark aspects. For this reason, most human beings are born without memories of their previous incarnations. This veil of forgetfulness, far from being a curse, is a cosmic mercy. Without it, the weight of the past would be unbearable for many souls, and the task of living the present fully would become impossible. However, as the being advances in its evolution, the fog dissipates and fragments of its story begin to emerge, not as static memories, but as a deep intuition, as a silent recognition that guides its steps with an inexplicable certainty. The soul that has awakened to the reality of reincarnation knows that each life is a chapter in a much greater work. It understands that the bonds established in this existence are continuations of past stories, that the circumstances it faces are the reflection of previous decisions, and that its current purpose is intrinsically connected to what it has experienced before. But remembering alone is not enough. The true purpose of accessing the Akashic records is not mere curiosity, but transformation. The knowledge of the past is only useful if it is used to build a higher future. It is not enough to know that one has lived before. What matters is understanding what lessons remain pending, which aspects must be refined, and how one can break the cycle of repetitions that keep the soul trapped in patterns of suffering. Conscious access to Akashic memory is an art that must be cultivated with discipline and purity of intention. It is not about opening doors without preparation or invoking memories without purpose. Wisdom schools have always warned that those who seek to know their story without being prepared to face it may encounter shadows they are not yet ready to integrate. Remembering is a sacred act, and as such must be approached with reverence and clarity. Ultimately, the Akashic records are not just an archive of the past, but a reflection of the present and a window to the future. The soul is not a prisoner of its history, but the author of its destiny. Every decision, every thought, and every act is creating new lines in this vast cosmic book. And the one who understands this truth acquires an unparalleled power, the power to write their own story with full awareness, without being a slave to the past, without fearing the future, with the certainty that the spirit on its eternal journey always has the opportunity to be reborn, to grow, and to transcend. Chapter 8. Karma as the law of cosmic balance. Nothing in the universe happens by chance. There is no effect without a cause, nor cause without consequence. Every action, thought, and emotion emits a vibration that sooner or later returns to its source. The law of karma is not a mystical concept, nor a superstition from ancient Eastern doctrines, but an immutable truth, the very structure upon which the harmony of the cosmos is sustained. Karma is the law of compensation, the principle of balance that governs the evolution of all souls. Unlike certain simplistic interpretations, karma is not punishment or reward. It is not the scale of a supreme judge who imposes penalties or merits according to an external moral code. It is a natural law, like gravity, like the expansion and contraction of the universe, like the cycle of life and death. It is the force that maintains order in the flow of existence, ensuring that all energy returns to its source and that every being receives exactly what it has generated. When an individual acts, they not only affect their surroundings, but also imprint the vibration of their action upon their own soul. Every thought, every word, every intention is a seed that will eventually sprout. What is experienced today is merely the manifestation of seeds sown in the past, and what is sown today will determine the course of future lives. Thus, karma is not something received from external forces, but the echo of one's own energy in motion. In esoteric tradition, it is taught that karma operates on various levels. It governs not only the destiny of individuals, but also that of families, nations, civilizations, and even worlds. There are personal karmas that directly affect each being according to their past actions, collective karmas that bind groups of souls to shared experiences due to their common vibrations, and planetary karmas that regulate the evolution of worlds and the humanities that inhabit them. Everything is interconnected in the great web of existence, and no action occurs in a vacuum. The ancient sages understood that the justice of the universe is not based on human rules, but on the balance of energies generated by each being. For this reason, religions that have presented a punishing or merciful God have distorted the reality of karma. There are no divine indulgences that exempt a soul from its own responsibility, nor eternal condemnations that deprive it of the opportunity to redeem itself. All energy emitted must be harmonized, but the process of restoration is always guided by the consciousness of the being itself. Upon dying, the soul reviews its existence in the karmic mirror, seeing with clarity the impact of each of its actions. It then understands that it is not a victim of a blind fate, but the architect of its own reality. In preparing for a new incarnation, it precisely chooses the environment, circumstances, and challenges that will allow it to balance the forces still in disharmony. Each life is an opportunity for restoration, a stage designed by the soul itself to confront what it still needs to learn. Karma is not only manifested in the trials and difficulties that arise in existence, but also in the gifts and abilities with which each being is born. Innate knowledge, natural talent, intelligence, spiritual sensitivity. These are not arbitrary privileges granted to a few, but the result of past efforts. Those who have cultivated wisdom in previous lives are reborn with the ability to easily grasp hidden truths. Those who have practiced art and music awaken with intact inspiration. Those who have dedicated their lives to serving others find in their new incarnation circumstances that facilitate their inner development. But karma is not only individual, societies also reap what they sow. Civilizations that have built their history on violence, exploitation, and ignorance eventually face disintegration and chaos as the natural result of their actions. Peoples who have cultivated knowledge, harmony, and respect for universal laws prosper and evolve. Everything follows the same principle. Energy returns to its source, and balance is always restored. Mystery schools have taught since ancient times that understanding the law of karma is the key to freeing oneself from unnecessary suffering. Ignorance of this law causes human beings to live in a state of complaint, feeling like victims of external circumstances without realizing that everything they experience is the manifestation of their own past. But when the soul awakens to this truth, it stops cursing its fate and begins to transform it. Those who understand karma act with full awareness that every choice shapes their future. They do not sow hatred because they know hatred will return to them. They do not generate violence because they know violence only breeds more violence. They do not hoard wealth out of greed because they know that accumulation without purpose diverts the soul from its true growth. Instead, they seek to live in harmony with universal laws, sowing in the present the light they wish to encounter in the future. But karma is not immutable. It is not a sentence engraved in stone. Everything can be transmuted. Just as a drop of poison can dissolve in an ocean of pure water, so too can the mistakes of the past be balanced with the awakening of consciousness. True spiritual alchemy does not consist of turning lead into gold, but in transforming the shadows of the self into light, in dissolving karmic burdens through love, knowledge, and the will to evolve. Esoteric traditions teach that there are ways to accelerate the restoration of karmic balance. Deep meditation, selfless service, purification of thoughts, and alignment with truth can harmonize energies that would otherwise take lifetimes to resolve. But these are not magical formulas or shortcuts to escape the law. The only real path is genuine inner change, the conscious transformation of the self. Thus, karma is not a condemnation, but a compass. It is not a weight that binds, but a force that propels. It is not a chain that imprisons, but an infinite opportunity for growth. The one who understands this law no longer fears destiny, because they know they are building it with every act, every word, every thought. And just as every seed has its time to bloom, everything that has been sown in existence will return to its source, bringing with it the lesson the soul needs to take the next step in its ascension. Chapter 9. Forgetting, Rebirth, and the Veil of Maya. Each time the soul descends into the material world, it crosses the threshold of forgetfulness, is born into a new body, in new circumstances, in a carefully selected scenario according to the laws of karma, but without remembering where it comes from or who it has been before. its history dissolves into the fog of the unconscious. And thus, it begins again, as if its existence were unique and isolated, with no apparent connection to past lives. Why does this happen? Because the universe, which is order and consciousness, allows the soul to forget its true origin. Wouldn't it be easier to remember the lessons already learned, recognize the karmic debts, avoid repeated mistakes, and move forward without delay towards enlightenment? This is one of the deepest questions that esoteric philosophy has sought to answer since time immemorial, and the key to this mystery lies in the concept of the veil of Maya, the great illusion that envelops material existence and makes the soul believe it is separated from its divine origin. Maya, in the Vedic tradition, is the force that generates the perception of duality, the barrier that prevents the true nature of the self and the universe from being seen. It is the substance of illusion, the matrix into which the spirit immerses itself to experience the density of earthly life. Maya is not real in itself, but it is real in its effect on the soul's perception. At birth, every being becomes trapped in the web of the senses, in the identity of the ego, in the flow of thoughts and emotions that lead them to identify with their body, their name, their current story, thus forgetting their cosmic vastness. Yet this forgetting is not a punishment nor a mistake of fate. It is a necessary condition for the earthly experience to have meaning. If the soul were to fully remember each of its previous incarnations, if it knew exactly who it had been, what it had done and why it returned, life would lose its purpose. There would be no true choice, no discovery, no merit in evolution. Everything would be a mechanical repetition of pre-existing knowledge, and the soul would have no opportunity to develop wisdom on its own. The veil of forgetfulness allows each life to be an authentic test. The soul must find its way without conscious memories, guided only by its innate tendencies, its intuitions, and the subtle echoes of its karmic memory. Its decisions are not conditioned by the weight of the past, but are forged in the freedom of the present. Only then can evolution be genuine. Only then can learning be integrated into the very essence of the being. However, although forgetting is necessary, it is not absolute. There are cracks in the veil of Maya, moments when the soul catches glimpses of its true nature. From childhood, many beings experience flashes of memories that do not correspond to their current life. These are children who speak of places they have never visited, who describe events that occurred before their birth, who demonstrate skills and knowledge they could not have acquired in this existence. These memory fragments are residues of the previous life, vestiges of knowledge that has not yet been completely dissolved by immersion in matter. But as the child grows, the world molds them. Education, culture, and beliefs imposed by society reinforce the illusion that only the here and now exist, that life begins with birth and ends with death. Thus the veil becomes denser, connections to the past fade, and the human being becomes a prisoner of their earthly identity. Nevertheless, those who seek knowledge can work to tear this veil and recover the memory of their soul. The mystery schools have taught since ancient times that the awakening of consciousness allows access to fragments of the past, to reconnect with the higher purpose, and to understand the meaning of the path traveled. Through deep meditation, introspection, and certain spiritual practices, it is possible to bring into the present the wisdom acquired in previous lives and use it to accelerate the evolution of the soul. But this knowledge should not be sought out of mere curiosity. Remembering implies responsibility. It is not about accumulating facts about who one was in another existence, but about understanding what lessons were left pending, what patterns continue to repeat, and what aspects of the self still need transformation. The true awakening does not consist in recovering memories, but in integrating the wisdom that already lies hidden behind them. The veil of Maya is powerful, but not indestructible. Every act of consciousness weakens it. Every awakening tears it a little more. Whoever begins to question reality as it has been taught, whoever looks at the world with the eyes of a seeker and not of a prisoner, begins to perceive the threads of the illusion that surrounds them. The truth is not hidden. It is veiled by the limited perception of the human being. The process of remembering does not occur suddenly, but in stages. First, the soul begins to feel a deep dissatisfaction with the conventional version of reality. Then it starts to experience synchronicities, inexplicable connections, encounters with people with whom it feels an immediate bond, signs that seem to guide it toward a greater purpose. Later, as its consciousness expands, fragments of forgotten knowledge begin to emerge, clear intuitions, memories that surface in dreams or in meditative states. Finally, when the veil has been sufficiently torn, the soul encounters its true self, recognizing that it has never been fully separated, that its journey did not begin in this life, nor will it end in this one, but is part of an infinite dance of evolution. Yet the danger of awakening is attachment to memory. Many, upon discovering fragments of their past lives, fall into the trap of the ego, clinging to old identities, claiming titles of greatness, anchoring themselves in stories of power and glory instead of using that knowledge to transcend. It does not matter who you were, but what you do with who you are now. It is not relevant whether in another life you were a sage, a warrior, a king, or a beggar, because the only purpose of remembering is to allow for the transformation of the present. Thus, the question is not, who was I? But what must I learn so as not to repeat what I have already lived? The veil of forgetfulness is a blessing disguised as a restriction. It allows us to live each life with the intensity of the new. It forces us to develop discernment. It gives us the opportunity to choose without the burden of what has already passed. But for those who seek the truth, the veil can be crossed. Remembering is an act of power, but acting wisely in the face of what is remembered is the true path to enlightenment. Chapter 10. Karmic Encounters: How Weapons Are Recognized in Every Life. Nothing in existence is random. Every encounter, every bond that forms throughout life responds to an invisible structure woven by the threads of karma and spiritual affinity. Those who appear on our path do not do so by chance, but because in some way their story is intertwined with ours. Love and hate, friendship and rivalry, loyalty and betrayal are not mere circumstances of fate, but manifestations of a cosmic balance that transcends time. Souls are not isolated entities, but travelers on a shared journey through multiple incarnations. They meet and reunite, forming bonds that extend beyond death and rebirth. Each life is a new scene in a larger play where characters change roles, but the learning remains. A father in one lifetime may be born as a son in another. An enemy from the past can become the most loyal friend. A lost lover may reappear with a new face, but the same essence. These encounters do not happen by chance. They are governed by the law of karma. When two souls have shared significant experiences in past lives, their energy becomes linked, and that vibration draws them together again in future incarnations. It is not always to continue where they left off, but to resolve unfinished business, to balance karmic debts, or to fulfill a greater purpose. The recognition of the soul signs and symptoms. When two souls that were connected in the past meet again in this life, a peculiar phenomenon occurs, an immediate recognition, a sense of familiarity that defies all logic. It may manifest as an inexplicable attraction, a deep connection from the very first moment, a certainty of having known the other person before, even if, in the physical reality, they have never met. However, soul recognition does not always translate into harmonious relationships. Many times, souls return together not out of love, but to settle pending accounts. Karma knows nothing of personal preferences. Its only function is to restore balance. Thus, those who were once the cause of pain for another may find themselves in reversed roles, experiencing firsthand what they once inflicted. This is why some bonds feel tense from the very beginning, as if there is an invisible weight between both people, a thread of conflict that activates as soon as they meet. When souls that have shared past experiences reunite, there are unmistakable signs, a sense of déjà vu, as if the relationship had already existed before, an instant and deep connection with no need for words or explanations, a mutual understanding that transcends time, where emotions flow naturally regardless of how much time has passed since the first encounter, an undeniable magnetism that may express as love, admiration, or even antagonism and rejection. Recurrent dreams with the person in scenarios from other eras, as if the unconscious remembers what the conscious mind has forgotten. These bonds can manifest in any type of relationship: parents and children, inseparable friends, lovers who defy all odds, rivals whose hostility seems destined from the start. It does not matter the form they take. The reality is always the same. Souls seek and find each other when there is still something they must learn together. Karmic loves and evolutionary relationships. Romantic relationships are undoubtedly one of the most intense expressions of karmic encounters. Love is not a whim of fate, but the reflection of a bond forged in other lifetimes. When two souls have shared a deep love in a previous existence, it is common for them to cross paths again in another life, drawn together by the force of that connection. But karmic love is not always harmonious. Some souls reunite with an irresistible attraction, but carry with them the wounds of the past. In these cases, the relationship may be full of challenges, as if the universe were testing their capacity to heal, to forgive, to transform pain into growth. In contrast, there are souls who meet in a higher state of evolution and who have decided to return together, not because of unresolved debts, but to assist each other in their development. These are evolutionary relationships, where the bond transcends earthly attraction and becomes mutual support on the spiritual path. Encounters of this kind are characterized by natural harmony, deep understanding without the need for explanations, and a shared purpose that goes beyond the personal. These are not relationships destined for dependency or attachment, but for the expansion of the soul. Bonds of learning and the purpose of karmic encounters. Not all souls that cross paths in one life are destined to stay together. Some encounters have a brief but essential purpose. A stranger who appears at just the right moment to offer a word of wisdom and is never seen again. A teacher who unknowingly awakens dormant knowledge. An enemy who forces us to confront our own shadows. Every person who enters our life leaves a mark on the path of the soul. Some leave subtle imprints, others deep scars, but all fulfill a function. The purpose of karma is not to punish, but to teach. Every encounter, every relationship, every bond is an opportunity to evolve, to balance energies, to close cycles that have remained open. Sometimes the lesson is to let go. Not all souls are meant to accompany us forever. Some only appear to teach us something and then continue on their way. Clinging to what must depart is prolonging karma that has already been fulfilled. True wisdom lies in recognizing when a connection has completed its purpose and in accepting that in the grand cycle of existence, encounters are never final, nor are goodbyes forever. Ultimately, there are no strangers in life, only souls meeting again. There are no accidental bonds or empty relationships. Every person who enters our path is there for a reason, revealing what we still need to learn, what we still need to heal, what we still need to remember. Thus, the question is not why certain encounters happen, but what teaching they bring. And when the soul understands this, every bond becomes a mirror, every relationship a path of evolution, and life itself a journey where past and present intertwine in an infinite dance of growth and awakening. Chapter 11, Spirit Before and the Trap of Attachment. Death is a transition, a door that opens to more subtle dimensions where the soul, freed from its earthly shell, continues its journey in the infinite spiral of existence. However, not all souls manage to cross this threshold harmoniously. Some become trapped in the shadows of their own ignorance, wandering between the world of the living and the afterlife, held by invisible chains they themselves have forged over their multiple incarnations. These are the wandering spirits, those who have lost their way, rejected the light, or have become attached in despair to that which no longer belongs to them. Souls that remain bound to the earthly plane after death are not victims of divine punishment or external judgment, but prisoners of their own attachment. Life in the material world leaves deep marks on consciousness, and when death arrives, those souls that have not detached from their desires, fears, and obsessions find it difficult to break free from the illusion of the physical world. Some cling to the places they lived, the objects they possessed, the people they loved, or even unresolved conflicts. Their reality becomes an echo of what was, a repetitive cycle of emotions and thoughts that keeps them in a state of limbo, unable to move on to the next phase of their evolution. In ancient esoteric traditions, it was taught that the soul's passage depended largely on its state of consciousness at the time of death. Those who have lived with detachment, with the certainty that material things are only a temporary veil, cross the threshold with ease, without fear or resistance. But those who have cultivated attachment, resentment, or the denial of spiritual existence encounter a barrier that they themselves have built. They do not see the light calling them, nor do they hear the guidance of the beings who come to their aid. In their confusion, they cling to the world that no longer belongs to them, believing they can still dominate it. believing they can still exert their will over what is left behind. Wandering souls are not all the same. Some remain in this state for a brief period until their energy runs out and they are finally swept away by the current of evolution. Others, however, can prolong their stay in the intermediate planes for centuries, repeating their old customs, unable to accept their new state. Some are unaware that they have died and continue with their habits, visiting the same places, trying to communicate with the living, desperately seeking the routine that once gave them security. Others, aware of their condition, try to attach themselves to humans through subtle influences, feeding off the energy of the living to maintain the illusion that they still exist within the earthly flow. Attachment is the most dangerous trap for the soul because it binds it to a reality that no longer belongs to it. A spirit that does not release its past becomes a prisoner of itself, unable to perceive the path that lies ahead. The more it clings, the more it suffers because the nature of the universe is change, movement, and evolution. Nothing can remain static without paying a high price in the subtle planes, where consciousness is the only reality. Attachment becomes a self-imposed torment, a resistance that blocks the natural expansion of the being. Mystery schools have taught that detachment is the key to a harmonious transition. One who learns to let go in life does not fear letting go in death. One who understands that all material things are fleeting does not suffer when their body disintegrates and their soul ascends to new dimensions. But those who have lived in the illusion of permanence, in the obsession to possess, in the mistaken idea that their identity is tied to what they have accumulated or to whom they have known, face the painful process of learning by force what they refuse to accept in life. Wandering souls not only cling to places and people, but also to unresolved emotions, hatred, resentment, desire for revenge, fear, condemnation, guilt, and despair for what they left undone. All of this acts as a ballast that prevents the soul from advancing. The ancient sages warned about the importance of dying in peace, closing cycles before departure, forgiving and asking for forgiveness, not out of fear of divine punishment, but to avoid becoming trapped in the labyrinths of the intermediate world. However, even souls that have fallen into this trap have an exit. No spirit is condemned forever. Currently, the light of evolution calls them, the vibration of their own being seeks their destiny. Those who have been trapped in the shadows ultimately give in to the law of universal movement. Some are guided by more evolved beings who show them the way and help them release their burdens. Others manage to awaken by themselves when they finally accept their state and allow the natural flow of existence to carry them toward the next level of consciousness. However, there are those who resist until the last moment, clinging to the illusion with such strength that they become wandering entities, shadows that wander in the twilight, afraid to move forward, because they believe that by doing so they will lose what little they have left. These are the spirits that, in many traditions, have been described as lost souls, beings trapped between two worlds, unable to find peace. They cannot return to life, but neither can they continue their path. They are the most extreme manifestation of attachment, the living proof that the greatest obstacle to the evolution of the soul is not death, but the refusal to accept change. Religions have tried to explain this phenomenon with ideas of punishment and atonement, but the truth is simpler and fairer. There is no God who condemns these souls, no hell where they are punished. There is only their own resistance, their own fear, their own refusal to release what no longer belongs to them. But evolution is inexorable, and sooner or later, even the most wandering of souls must surrender to the universal law. Thus, the true work must be done in life. One who learns to let go before death claims them, one who understands that nothing in matter is permanent and that the only reality is the evolution of the spirit, will depart unbound and cross the threshold with the lightness of one who knows that their destiny is not here, but beyond. There is no loss, only transition. There is no separation, only a change of vibration. Attachment is the great illusion, the trap that the ego constructs to remain in control. But the soul, in its essence, is free, and when it remembers its true nature, nothing can hold it back. Thus, the question is not why some souls become trapped, but how much attachment we are willing to release before our moment to cross the threshold arrives. Chapter 12. The Path of the Initiates, Awakening in Life to Never Fall Asleep Again. Most people pass through life as if it were a dream, carried along by the flow of existence without questioning where they come from or where they are going. They are trapped in the illusion that their identity is limited to the body they inhabit and the time they believe they possess. They cling to matter, hoping it will provide them with security, seeking in the ephemeral what is fleeting, building on foundations of sand, and fearing death because they believe it is the end. But there are those who at some point in their journey begin to remember. A flash pierces the fog of illusion, and for an instant they see what others cannot. They feel that they have been here before, that their story is older than their name, and that their existence did not begin with birth, nor will it end with death. These are the so-called initiates, those who have awakened in life and understood that reality is vaster than what their senses show them. Unlike the common man, who only wakes up after death when faced with the truth of the transition, the initiate does not wait for death to reveal what they can already know now. They seek the truth in the present, tearing the veil of Maya while still inhabiting the flesh. They awaken from illusion before the body expires. For them, the path does not begin when life ends. It begins when consciousness opens and the spirit recognizes its own eternity. Awakening in life is the difference between the one who dies in ignorance and the one who crosses the threshold with open eyes. The former is taken by surprise, still bound to the illusion of personal identity, confused and fearful of the unknown. The latter, on the other hand, has already traveled the path before departure. They have explored the invisible worlds without needing to abandon the flesh. They have learned to project their consciousness beyond the body. They have unveiled the mysteries of birth and death, and when their time comes, they are not afraid, for they know exactly what awaits them. Mystery schools have taught since time immemorial that true initiation does not occur after death, but in life. It is not an external ritual, nor a title or recognition from a secret order. It is an internal change, a transformation of perception that allows one to see beyond form and understand the essence of all things. It is not intellectual knowledge, but direct experience, the certainty that the visible reality is only a fraction of existence, and that the spirit in its essence is immortal. The initiate understands that reincarnation is not an automatic process, but a choice that can be transcended when the soul reaches full awareness of its true nature, while the common man remains trapped in the cycle of samsara, repeating lives without remembering the previous ones. The initiate walks with lucidity, knowing the structure of the cosmos and their place within it. They are not a puppet of karma, but its architect. They are not a prisoner of destiny, but its creator. However, awakening is not an easy task. From the moment the soul descends into matter, it is trapped in the illusion of separation. Education, culture, history, religion, and even biology reinforce the idea that only what the senses can perceive exists. The consciousness, dulled by the density of matter, follows the flow of existence without questioning its purpose. The mind fills with noise, distractions, and desires that take the being away from its essence. Only those who have felt the call, those who have experienced the dissatisfaction of the earthly, those who have seen beyond the immediate, begin the search for awakening. For them, life is no longer a meaningless routine, but a path they must walk with attention. Every experience, every person they meet, every challenge they face becomes an opportunity to elevate their vibration and expand their consciousness. The process of awakening begins with doubt. Whoever has never doubted the reality imposed on them has never begun their journey. Doubt is the crack through which light filters into the darkness of the conditioned mind. It is the questioning of the established order, the suspicion that the world is not as it seems, the discomfort with simplistic explanations that attempt to enclose the vastness of the universe in limited dogmas. But doubt alone is not enough. Many get trapped in skepticism, rejecting both the visible and the invisible, falling into the trap of denial. The true initiate does not stop at denial, but seeks, explores ancient traditions, investigates the secrets of nature, delves into their own being and experiences reality beyond matter. They do not accept imposed truths, but neither do they discard what they do not understand. They become seekers, alchemists of consciousness, explorers of the infinite. Those who have awakened in life no longer fear death because they have experienced it before it arrives. They have learned to project their consciousness outside the body. They have traveled the invisible worlds in deep meditation states, exploring the regions of the spirit, without needing to leave the flesh. For them, death is not an abyss, but a known threshold. It is not the end, but a transition they have already gone through many times in the inner plane. The great initiates have left a record of their experience, from the ancient sages of Egypt to the masters of Tibet, from the Hermetic philosophers to the mystics of Sufism. All have spoken of awakening as the only path to true freedom, not political freedom or economic freedom, but the only real freedom, the liberation of the soul from the cycle of ignorance and unconscious rebirth. Awakening in life is the first step so as not to fall asleep in death. Those who have developed consciousness in the physical plane can choose their destiny in the spiritual plane. They can navigate the higher worlds without being swept away by the currents of karma. They can ascend to planes of existence where rebirth is no longer necessary, not because they flee from life, but because they have understood it in its entirety. But not all who awaken in life choose to leave the cycle. Some, in their compassion, decide to return once more, not out of karmic obligation, but of their own will. These are the true masters, the bodhisattvas, the guardians of humanity. They have reached enlightenment but have renounced their own liberation to guide others. They know that the knowledge they possess is a fire that must be shared, a torch that illuminates the path for those still trapped in the darkness of forgetfulness. Awakening is not a privilege reserved for a few, but a possibility open to all who dare to look beyond the illusion. There are no inaccessible secrets, no hidden truths for those who truly seek. Everything is before the eyes of those who know how to see. Everything is written in the heart of those who know how to listen. The difference between the common man and the initiate is that the former lives and dies without remembering who they are, while the latter awakens before departing, ensuring that when they cross the threshold, there will no longer be darkness or confusion, only the absolute certainty that their being is eternal. Thus, the true path is not to learn how to die, but to learn how to awaken while still alive. For only those who have awakened in life can cross death without ever falling asleep again. Chapter 13. Beyond the Wheel of Samsara. The Last Journey of the Soul. Most human beings travel through existence trapped in the wheel of samsara, incarnating again and again in the endless flow of births and deaths like travelers without memory. They go from one life to another without remembering their true origin, without understanding that each existence is just an episode in the vast path of evolution. They are swept by the current of karma, repeating patterns, facing the same lessons in different forms, seeking answers in the illusion of matter without realizing that liberation is not found externally but in the deep understanding of the soul's purpose. But there are those who, after countless incarnations, begin to glimpse the true destiny of the spirit. At some point in their pilgrimage, the soul grows tired of the repetition, of the ignorance, of the self-inflicted suffering. A different yearning awakens in it, a fire that does not seek earthly pleasures or fleeting triumphs, but the return to its original source. This yearning is the sign that the moment of the last journey, the ultimate transcendence, has arrived. Beyond the wheel of samsara, ancient spiritual traditions have spoken of this moment as the culmination of the initiate's path, the conquest of liberation that ends the cycle of rebirths. In the Vedic tradition, it is known as moksha, the liberation of the soul from the chains of karma and its merging with universal consciousness. In Buddhism, it is called nirvana, the state in which the ego dissolves and the being reaches absolute peace. In the Western mystery schools, it has been described as the transfiguration of the soul, the passage to a plane where individuality is no longer chained to the density of matter. But what does it really mean to transcend the wheel of samsara? Is it the annihilation of the self, the disappearance into nothingness? No, it is the culmination of the evolutionary journey, the moment when the soul, having learned all the lessons that existence in matter could offer, is no longer bound to the need for rebirth, not because it flees from life, but because it has understood its true essence. The last journey of the soul is not a path that can be traveled with the rational mind. It is not something imposed from the outside, but a choice that arises from the depths of the spirit. One who has reached this point no longer has desires. They no longer cling to the past. They no longer seek to complete something they lack, because they have understood that they were never incomplete. They have awakened to the truth that they have always been one with the whole, and that the identity they thought they possessed was only a passing reflection in the vast current of existence. To reach this state, the soul must have transcended karma, not by eliminating it, but by understanding its nature and leaving it behind. As long as there are unsatisfied desires, as long as there are attachments, as long as debts exist that require balance, the soul will continue to return in incarnation. But when all has been understood, when only pure consciousness remains, reincarnation is no longer necessary. The door to samsara opens and the soul is free to cross it or stay, not out of obligation, but out of love for those who still walk the path. The ancient masters who reached this state could have abandoned material existence forever, but many chose to stay to guide humanity. These are the great initiates, the bodhisattvas, the masters of wisdom who have transcended the wheel of samsara but have renounced their own liberation to help those still suffering in ignorance, not because they are bound by karma, but because their love for humanity is so vast that they choose to return again and again as beacons of light in a world of shadows. The last journey of the soul is not a physical destination nor a location within time and space. It is a state of consciousness in which duality dissolves, in which separation ceases to exist. It is not a flight from reality, but the union with the supreme reality. It is the return to the origin, but with the full awareness of having traveled the entire path. But this destiny is not imposed, and not all beings are ready to reach it at the same time. Each soul has its own rhythm, its own path, its own evolution. Some are close to liberation, while others are just beginning to awaken. Eternity is vast, and the universe does not rush anyone. The key is not to seek escape from samsara, but to understand it, to accept it as part of the learning, to live each life with full awareness until the soul itself decides it no longer needs to return. And when that moment comes, when the soul has reached the fullness of its knowledge, the wheel of samsara stops, and the spirit crosses the final threshold, not into darkness, but into the infinite light of its true essence. Because there was never imprisonment, there was never separation. There was only a journey of return to what has always been. Chapter 14. The Return to the Source, the Union with Cosmic Consciousness. Everything in the universe follows a cycle of expansion and contraction, of going and returning, of separation and reunification. Just as a wave rises from the ocean, and after a moment of independent existence returns to its origin, so too the soul, after countless journeys through forms, ultimately returns to the source from which it emerged. This is the ultimate destiny of all conscious existence, the end of the pilgrimage through duality, the dissolution of the illusion of individuality into the vastness of cosmic consciousness. Throughout its incarnations, the soul has believed itself to be separate. It has felt the loneliness of earthly existence. It has struggled to find meaning in the fragmentation of matter. It has passed through ignorance and enlightenment, attachment and renunciation, joy and suffering. It has been both emperor and beggar, loved and hated, created and destroyed. But deep within itself, there has always been a distant echo, a voice that whispers that none of this is permanent, that existence in form is but a moment in the eternal flow of consciousness. When the soul finally reaches the point where all has been understood, when no desire remains unresolved, when karma has been completely balanced and the need for rebirth has extinguished, the great return occurs. The being merges with the totality, not as a drop disappearing into the ocean, but as a spark recognizing that it has always been part of the infinite fire. The spiritual traditions of both East and West have tried to describe this state with words such as moksha, nirvana, enlightenment, union with God. But all these expressions are limited because the human mind can only conceive of realities that fit within its reference frameworks. The return to the source is not the extinction of the self, but its boundless expansion. It is not the loss of consciousness, but its integration with absolute consciousness. It is not the death of the individual, but its realization in its purest form. The ancient sages knew that the universe is not a blind mechanism or a senseless chaos, but a living structure, a supreme intelligence expressing itself through all creation. Every star that shines in the sky, every atom that vibrates in space, every thought that crosses the mind of a conscious being is a manifestation of that universal intelligence, and the soul, on its journey through matter, has been a fragment of that intelligence seeking its own understanding. When the spirit returns to the source, there are no more questions because all the answers have been found. There are no more searches because everything that was sought was within the being itself. The individuality dissolves, time ceases to exist, and the concept of I transforms into something vast, undefinable, eternal. But here lies the deepest mystery. The return to the source is not the end, but the beginning of a new cycle. The universe is an eternal heartbeat, a cosmic breath that never stops. After unification with the totality, after the dissolution of the illusion of individuality, consciousness may choose to manifest again, not by karmic need, but by pure will. Thus, great masters have arisen, beings who have achieved realization, but have chosen to return to material existence to guide others in their awakening. The highest initiates have understood that evolution is not a straight line with a fixed destination, but an infinite spiral in which the being can move freely once it has transcended the illusion of samsara. There is no heaven or hell, no punishment or reward, only consciousness at different levels of manifestation. The source has never been separate from its creations. It has only allowed its fragments to venture into the game of existence, to eventually return to it with a deeper understanding. Union with cosmic consciousness is not something that happens only after death. It can be experienced in life. When a human being transcends their identification with the body and mind and recognizes themselves as an eternal spirit, enlightenment is not a sudden event nor a privilege for a few, but the natural destiny of all conscious beings. The only difference between those who attain it and those who do not is the time each one needs to awaken. And when that awakening finally comes, everything changes. Fear disappears because there is no longer any separation between the self and the universe. Suffering ceases because it is understood that everything that happens is part of a perfect flow of learning. Death loses its meaning because the spirit recognizes itself as immortal. There are no words that can describe the vastness of this state. Only those who have experienced it know that it is the supreme truth, the answer to all questions, the home the soul has always belonged to. And thus the final mystery is revealed. The return to the source is not a journey to a distant place, but an awakening to what has always been, because the soul has never been separate from the whole. It had only forgotten.